Dude, so I was really hoping we would get like a nice sunset here, but I think this is the best we're getting. Um, I wanted to talk about the internet and our relationship to the internet because, I'm really worried about how much we rely on the internet to provide meaning and value in our lives, how much we rely on social media and on video games. And I'm worried what the future is going to bring if we continue on the path we're on as a society. And I think there is hope, but I think the only way to harness that hope is to take control of our lives as individuals and live the lives that we know we should be living instead of the life of just being constantly on the internet and constantly having our feelings dictated by what we see on the internet and, constantly on social media and on video games and wasting time, essentially, really just wasting time on distractions instead of what we really want to be doing with our lives. Because I would bet, most people watching this video have things in your life that you want to be doing that are not, on the internet, that are not, just leveling up some video game character or getting a bunch of followers on social media. I think, I'm not an absolutist, I don't think that the answer is going Amish or something like that. And I don't think there is absolutely no real meaning to be found on the internet. I think there certainly is meaning on the internet, I've met some of my closest friends on the internet, and I'm sure many of you can say the same. So I think there absolutely can be meaning in the internet, but I think that we should not be overly relying on it. And what's kind of funny is when I was a kid, you would have these like people who are always, the older generation always being like, oh, these darn kids on their darn Nintendos and, stupid stuff like that. And everybody kind of dismissed it as like the older generation just being really out of touch and just, kind of being annoying. And, I'm starting to wonder now if we really should have been taking that warning more seriously. And like, don't get me wrong, I think there's definitely, a level to it of fear mongering. I think, there's some level of people that kind of give you a good warning and other people who just fear monger about it. But, I'm sort of becoming that myself in terms of worrying about what the future will bring for the younger generation who really has not lived life without this sort of level of internet presence. And I obviously was born after the creation of the internet. I would guess most people watching this, were born after the creation of the internet. But I think I would guess most people watching this are of the age where we do remember a time before the internet was as prevalent and as heavily depended on as it is now. And I never had video games as a kid. My parents would not let me get video games. We didn't have a TV either. But my parents would let me go to friends' houses, and I had a friend I would go watch SpongeBob with, and that was pretty fun. And then later on, I had another friend I'd go play Mario Kart with. But I'm really grateful in retrospect that my parents did not ever really let me get video games until I eventually, as a teenager, got my own job and then bought games myself. But I'm really grateful that my parents didn't let me do that because I think, I sort of learned to find value in life beyond technology and beyond the internet. And now as somebody who, I guess, maybe it was inevitable for me to go find and really like computers after sort of being, not exposed to computers for the beginning of my life. Maybe it was inevitable there, but I really feel as if, at this point in my life, I think I have a pretty healthy relationship, generally, with the internet. And that said, though, it's so easy to still fall into the trap of, essentially doom scrolling whatever it is. Like sometimes, I'll be working on something and then I'll just open up a tab of like YouTube and just click video after video. And it's usually like, I can't think of, what I need to be doing with what I'm working on. So I just sort of like open up YouTube as a distraction. And then, 3 hours later, you're just like, wait a minute, what did I just do? Where did my time go? And, I think that's just not a good place to be in for anybody. And I think there's steps we can take, though, to resolve that and to work on that. And, like I said, we have to work on that as individuals if we're going to fix our relationship to technology as a society. And, I think one of the easiest steps actually is finding other areas in life that you can, have fulfillment and have meaning in that are not related to, the internet and social media and video games and that sort of stuff. It's easier to pick up something new than it is to quit something that isn't good for you. And I'm not an absolutist in this. I don't think the answer is just completely drop and delete your like social media accounts or stop playing video games infinitely. Like I definitely still play video games sometimes. But I think, everything should be in moderation, and I think finding anything in life that can give you some sort of meaning that is not connected to the internet is a really good first step. And something else that I've really been trying to do in the past several years is trying to hone my focus and, getting rid of the impulse and the distraction of the internet. And that's something else that, I really worry that the future generations are going to really struggle with. Sorry, there's like mosquitos and stuff out here. The future generations are really going to struggle with being able to focus on anything without the constant distraction of the internet. Because, we all kind of know what like the sort of TikTok scrolling does to your brain, essentially. I'm trying to avoid kind of listing out just a litany of all the negatives of the internet. But, that's kind of a big one. The whole like TikTok brain mindset, or I don't know, YouTube shorts or whatever else, where it's just that infinite scrolling and infinite fast-paced content, and what that does to your focus. So I am really worried for the future generation of kids who are just growing up with that and literally are just not going to know anything besides that. But I do think we can train our focus, and I think if we are very conscious of the time we're spending on the internet, and not just the time itself, but how much meaning we're placing in the various things we're doing on the internet, I think the more conscious we are of that, and the more we really train our focus and catch ourselves when we're impulsively checking phones or impulsively thinking about something from the internet or whatever, the more we catch ourselves and the more we try to train our focus, the better we will be able to do, and the more we'll be able to reclaim what, essentially was lost in terms of a generational mindset here. And I would sort of guess, if there's anybody above a certain age watching this video, you probably are much less able to relate here. But I think anybody around my age, maybe plus or minus 10 years here, is going to be able to relate to this in terms of just truly unhealthy dependence on technology. And, I think the real solution is just we have to, as individuals, be conscious of what we're doing and be conscious of our relationship to our phones and to the internet and social media and video games, and essentially just fill in the blank there with whatever it is you don't have a healthy relationship to. And, if completely just cold turkey quitting something is the answer for you, then good for you, do it. But I think for a lot of us, that's not going to be the answer. I think the answer is just going to be living life in moderation and just ensuring that we have value in things that are not the internet and not online. Anyways, that's about it. I will see you next time. Peace.